Welcome back. I am your host. I am attorney Stephen Leahy, and this is the IRS Radio Hour on AM 560. The Answer.
I did want to apologize there, Attorney Lee. I know this is the IRS Radio Hour, and I did do a little talking there. It gets me so heated when people go common sense gun laws and they can't.
And it's not common sense.
It's not, and they can't announce what an assault rifle is. I can put put two guns up together, and you can say the one that looks scarier. But they both shoot the same round. They both shoot the same amount.
Well, assault weapon actually is an automatic weapon, and they've been outlawed since 1935. And so, you can still get it because you have to have. But that's not what the guy used.
I know.
He didn't even use an AR-15.
What was it? A Sig Sauer?
Yeah, so it wasn't an AR-15, and everybody and they're going after the AR-15. Well, it was like an AR-15. So anyway, we're gonna go on with our next.
We could go on all day, but ladies and gentlemen, coming up right now, it's the blog. It's the blog segment. The blog. The blog.
Okay, this is the blog segment.
Getting back on track.
We're going to get back on track, but I want to say one more thing because I'm going to tell you that I think...
Yeah, because it's your show.
I think that
Debbie.
We did talk about this earlier, that I think it is the pivotal issue coming up is
our time.
Gun rights. Some people that I thought were on the left are Second Amendment protectors, and some that I thought were on the right are for getting rid of guns. So it's a kind of a pivotal issue, and really because again, it's about the Constitution, and I love the Constitution. So we talk a lot about that. But you know what else I love? I love helping people who have IRS problems.
And what kind of IRS problems are you going to talk about
today? What I want to talk about is my typical client. Okay, because the typical client is someone that they think that I have a blog out there, and the title of the blog is how long can I dodge the IRS? Because that's what people try to do, right? The typical thing is someone comes up, it comes to be April 15th. They're going to owe the IRS money, and they don't have the money to pay the IRS. So what do? They file an extension because they're afraid, and so they file an extension, and they say, "Oh man, we put that behind me, and now I can now I can put my." But what they don't understand is they're already getting problems because people don't understand that when you file an extension, you're supposed to pay your taxes by April 15th, even if you file an extension. So if I'm going to owe $10,000. By filing an extension doesn't mean I can pay my $10,000 later. It means I can file my tax return later, but I'm still supposed to pay the $10,000 by April 15th. So I'm already.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, most people don't know that, and that's what that gets them in this. And it gets them in this cascading tax problem.
It's like cascading tax problem
that we talk about.
But it's
often.
like having the Obamacare paying $500 and then the deductibles, and it really doesn't cover anything.
It doesn't cover anything. That's right. It's just money to take money away from you to give to somebody else. And that's what it comes out to be. But anyway, I'm taking a deep breath.
There's so much I can talk about.
I'm taking a deep breath. So anyway, this is what happens. So then what happens is that now your tax return is due October 15th. And October 15th is coming up. But nobody else has got their tax return, and nobody else is talking about it. So you forget about it, right? So now it comes, the next year's coming up, and you say, oh, man, I got to do my tax returns again. And you start thinking about it again. And you go, I didn't do last year's tax return, so I can't do this year's tax return until I do next. So I'm going to start working on last year's, and in the meantime, I'm going to file another extension. And so people file another extension. And this goes on for a couple of years. And this is what we call, this is that cascading tax problem. One of the problems with this and why this happens, and that's why people think they can dodge the IRS, is they say, well, I must be under the radar screen because I didn't file last year and the IRS hasn't said anything to me. And I didn't file this year and they still haven't said anything to me. And so they must not know that I didn't file. So maybe I don't have to file. Maybe.
Like the little kid taking a cookie from a cookie jar, like, oh, my parents didn't notice the one cookie.
Right.
They didn't notice two. What about 17 times I don't file my taxes?
That's right, and that does happen, and that's something I'm gonna talk about because because people get overwhelmed now. It's so many years that I haven't filed, and now they go into underground and they start working for cash, and they don't have a bank account. They're afraid to they can't buy a house. They can't because they can't get any credit because they haven't filed their tax returns. So you have to give tax returns in order to get credit. And if I don't have any tax, I ain't gonna get any credit. And so again, they go underground, and then they live in the shadows for years. And this is a big problem. Again, one of the problems is I always liken the IRS to this battleship because it takes so long for the battleship to turn, and you think you're safe until the battleship turns. It takes a long time, but once they turn and they get you, now it could be devastating. Because because you haven't hidden, they have computers, right? They have your number in a computer. They know if you filed or not. You can't dodge them. You can't be under the radar. And that's the thing I get people tell me all the time. I think I'm under the radar. They don't know that I'm here. No, they know you're there, and they're coming after you. And so if you have unfiled tax return, this is that problem. This is where it comes in. People get afraid, and so they'd rather ignore it. And what I've learned is, all day long, people ignore it. But when they're laying there in bed at night, that's all they can think about is their IRS problem because it's devastating. And so now they can't sleep at night because their IRS the problem is there, and it's never going to go away. And they think, well, I'm going to fix it this week. I'm going to fix it this year, and it doesn't get fixed, and it just keeps going and snowballing. What people don't understand is the IRS has 3 years to audit you. Right. So what will happen is if you don't file your tax return, they can't audit you or they can't come after you to collect unless they assess a tax against you. So if you don't file and they have records about you, 1099s, things like that, they will file a tax return for you. And then that tax return that they file for you is going to be a much larger number than it should be. And you don't even know it. They don't call you and tell you, oh, you know what, we filed it for you. Now you owe us. No. So now it's 4 or 5 years later. You think you're under the radar, and the IRS starts coming after you for this big number that they think that you owe or that they say that you owe. And now that's the number that they're going to try to collect. Now, there are things you can do when they do that. You can file and you can go back and amend it and file your tax return. And this is a big thing. Again, because people think that they've forgotten about you, but they haven't forgotten about you. And don't let, now this is and I called this the SFR, and I've talked about that on the show before. An SFR is what they call a substitute for return when the IRS does the return for you and they come after you. Now, another thing what happens is, now, the IRS has a 10-year statute to come after you, and that's what they call a CISA date, the collection statute expiration date, and that begins the day that the tax is assessed. Well, guess what? If I don't file a tax return and they don't file that for 3 more years, now they have an extra 3 years to come after me. And they come, so I'm expanding the time frame that I'm going to be under the IRS boot. For lack of a better term. Das Boot, that's correct. If the IRS thinks that you're trying to avoid them by paying, they simply will. That 10-year statute won't ever go away because they'll file a complaint in court and they'll get a judgment against you. And then that judgment, that never goes away. They can come after you for eternity to make you pay it, and you'll pay all of it. And that's why it's never a good idea to just ignore it. And if you have 10 years of unfiled tax returns or 5 years don't let that intimidate you. You can get on the right track and fix this. And that's what we do here at Opem Tax Resolutions and the law office of Stephen A. Leahy, PC. We help people solve their IRS problems, even if they have this. And again, this is the common thing that people get afraid of it because they let this roll out of control. Yeah, well, that's something that I didn't know and a lot of people don't know is what you said earlier with the extensions, and that's going to get a lot of people in trouble. Mm-hmm. And that's what's great about having a local guy around, somebody who not only understands but is there understands Chicago, understands the area, the people. That's right.
That's why Opem Tax Resolution is the best option for you and your family. So make sure you give them a call at 312-664-6649 or visit ChicagoTaxTeam.com where you can watch highlights of the videos.
Mm-hmm. And we have the podcast.
We have the podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned because the IRS saga is coming up right here on AM 560.
The Answer.